Hello everyone, it has been a while. I took a look at my last devlog this week to see where I left off, and there is a lot to cover, but very little to show. What do I mean by that? Last time I introduced you to the enemy in the game. At that time I had a reasonable idea of what kind of content I wanted to put in the game. So I spent a lot of time integrating new assets into the game. However, it became more and more obvious that the game itself just wasn't fun to play, and in no way scary, which was also a bummer. The reason for that was clear as day. The game didn't have anything to offer as a motivation to the player. It didn't have a hook. Different games motivate the player via different means. Some rely on an interesting story premise, others on a unique art style or gameplay. In the end, what motivates the player is to play through a certain fantasy. Being a really good competitive player, solving a mystery, or beating up the bad guys. My game didn't have anything like that. It's not like I just forgot about it, but my idea of what might motivate the player wasn't motivating at all in practice. The narration wasn't strong enough to capture the player's interest, and the gameplay wasn't engaging enough. So with all that experience of what didn't work, I decided to play around with different parts of the game design. I came up with completely new stories, different gameplay, and along the way decided to change up the art style as well. Because, let's be honest, the old one wouldn't have cut it for a horror game. When you are in this sort of phase of a project, you'll get a lot of good ideas, but many of them will be too big or too difficult to implement. As an example, one of my story iterations involved having interactions with different characters. The narrative hook would have been to get to know them and to figure them out. But of course, that would have meant to make a bunch of humanoid characters in Blender. And I'm not good at that. I'm currently iterating on the player character again, and that is so much work for just one character. I don't want to have 10 times the amount of work just to be able to tell a story. After all, I still want to finish the game in a reasonable amount of time. I need to strike a balance between player engagement and development time. Both can exist alongside each other very well. I have seen a bunch of horror games that are short and technically easy to make, but still feel engaging to the player. Most of the redesign in my head is done. I took all those different ideas, both new and old, and tried to connect them in a more meaningful way. This is hard to explain without spoiling everything, but let me try. Back when I started the project, it had a different name, and at that time I already wanted to make a horror game based on the idea of turning something completely normal into something very abnormal. The horror came from seeing this process happening and fearing what the end result of those changes would be. Then the story changed, and with it the title. The project is now called A Home in Darkness. As the name implies, I want to turn the idea of the home, a safe place, into something horrific. Everyone knows what a home is supposed to be, and seeing that transform was the main idea of the iteration I was working on up until recently. But all elements I've added and wanted to add to the game didn't connect as well with the theme as I had hoped. So now I have a decision to make. Do I believe in my theme, or do I believe in the game I already have? And for me, the answer is clear. The game doesn't do the theme justice, so the game needs to change. In fact, from the outside, the current situation might seem identical to when I changed the game's title. I even gave similar reasons back then. This time, however, I have more faith in the theme itself. I have more faith in what I want to tell, I just don't know how to tell it. The theme needs to get more support from the art style, story and the gameplay. And that is where I'm at. I'm still iterating through details, but I got a new red thread to follow. Anyway, I've mentioned in the beginning a lot has happened, but I have little to show. On the screen you can see the different iterations for the player character. I wanted the art style to fit more with the horror game, so I figured making the character look a little bit more realistic might do the trick. However, I'm aware that I'm a programmer, not an artist. So I needed to again find balance here. Trying to make something that is realistic enough to fit as a 3D horror game character, but still stylized enough for me to actually make. Thanks to a tool called Make Human, I was able to get a decent looking human mesh. But that mesh was a bit too realistic for me. It wouldn't fit with the environment. So I decided to simplify that model by building a mesh with less detail but using the same proportions. That already works much better. But there is something bothering me. The texture of the mesh is different from textures used in the environment. In the environment I'm clearly using pixel art and I want to use that on the player character as well. This isn't done yet, but I want to believe that I'm on the right track. What do you think? Which version do you like? Anyway, I think that's all I want and am able to show you today. Thank you very much for watching and I wish you a lot of progress on your own projects. Until next time, bye bye.